I'm Thinking of Ending Things from Charlie Kaufman, the writer of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Being John Malkovich, is an extremely complex deep dive exploring love, regret, and loneliness. In this video, we'll break down exactly what was going on and provide further insight into the film, and if we have time, maybe even explain why Jake's father hates Billy Crystal.
Billy Crystal is a Nancy.
But before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe if you like deep dives of film and television. It wouldn't be an ending explained if we didn't start right at the end. This is the final shot of the film, a car covered in snow outside a high school. But to figure out who's inside and how it got there, we have to go to the beginning where we're introduced to a young couple, Jake and Lucy. Well, at least we think her name is Lucy. Throughout the film, she's referred to as Louisa, Lucia, and even Ames. That's because she doesn't exist. She is merely a figment of Jake's imagination, of an idealized woman with no name that merely exists in his mind. When they're on their way to visit Jake's parents, he talks about his favorite poet, William Wordsworth, who wrote poems to a young woman named Lucy, who he described as beautiful and idealized. As we'll see throughout the film, Jake takes bits and pieces of his life and manifests them through this character and others. Here are a couple of examples. When Lucy finds Jake's childhood room, she sees a giant book of Wordsworth poems, a book by Ava H.D. called Rotten, which contains a poem that's heard throughout the film called Bone Dog, but we'll get into that in a bit. There are books on physics, Goethe's theory of colors, I hope I'm saying his name right, and a plethora of films. We see Lucy take on aspects of all of these things when she recites Bone Dog as her own poem, how she studies physics at university, her theories on how color is merely a construct of our mind, and her insanely analytical dissection of the film Woman Under the Influence, which puts my analysis of films to shame. Lucy is a woman who represents all the things Jake never became. For example, Lucy shows Jake's parents her paintings. These aren't actually her paintings, rather Romanticist painter Ralph Albert Blakelock's. She believes these paintings are a reflection of her innermost emotions, but Jake's father brushes them off, saying,
How can a picture of a field be sad without a sad person looking sad in the field?
We'll later find the same paintings Lucy had on her phone, which are actually Blakelock's, as inspiration for Jake's paintings he did as a child, now buried away in the basement to be hidden away and never seen of again. Perhaps that's why Jake tells Lucy he's afraid of the basement.
I hate the basement, if you really want to know. Basements are scary.
The paintings are a reminder of the life of an artist he could have had but never followed. Now he lives his life as a lowly janitor. Jake is this janitor. What we're seeing throughout this film are the moments right before his death as he plays through his life of what was and what could have been. Near the end of the film, we see him get into a car and take off his clothes during this freezing blizzard. Ironically, moments prior to this scene, Lucy questioned how long it would take for someone to die of hypothermia.
How long did it take? Hypothermia.
Perhaps even more sadly poetic is that final shot of the car covered in snow. It's framed just like one of Jake's landscape paintings. According to Jake's father, these paintings are devoid of emotion because there's no person in it to tell us how to feel. This final image, although ambiguous, I would argue, and possibly Kaufman too, is full of emotion. In fact, it's one of the few shots in the entire film that is bright and colorful, perhaps suggesting that Jake passing on into the blue where he can live forever in this dream of his accomplishments is something good. We literally see him accepting a Nobel Prize set against the background of his favorite musical, Oklahoma, at his high school where his peers once sneered at him, now cheering, as the frame fades to a bright blue. He is happy. The janitor is a romantic, not in terms of the style of art he likes, but how he longs to be with someone. There's a great scene where he watches a fake Robert Zemeckis film called Order Up. It's a romance in which a man strikes up the courage to tell a waitress he loves her. Jake never was able to do this in real life, too shy or afraid. About halfway through the movie, his mother even says to Lucy,
There are so many things that make him nervous. He keeps closing off more and more of the world. It's a problem.
This nervousness forced him to become more introverted and keep to himself. There's a great line early on in the film,
People stay in unhealthy relationships because it's easier. Basic physics.
Jake has stayed in an unhealthy relationship with himself, one in which it's easier to live alone than face the anxiety and nervousness of putting himself out there. We're told that Lucy is also a waitress, just like in that movie, but we learn that the story about how she met Jake at a trivia night never actually happened. The real story is that Jake watched her creepily from afar and never had the courage to go up to her. What we're seeing here is his imagination of what could have been if he had gone through with it. The janitor's life bleeds into this younger Jake's dreamlike world. For example, the girls who snicker at him in the hall are the girls who work at Tulsi Town. The loner girl with the rash in the hallways also works there. These two dancers who are rehearsing for Oklahoma smash into the locker, just like Jake's dancers do during their routine. And we should talk about that lengthy interpretive dance near the end. It's essentially what his life could have been if he had the courage to ask that girl out. It's happy, joyful, whimsical, that is until the appearance of the janitor, the representation of Jake's self-doubt, his real life. It crushes the dreams of what could have been, literally stabbing it to death. And all that's left is a sad janitor having to clean up the mess. It's no surprise then that after this scene is when he goes into the car, takes off his clothes, and freezes to death. That's when we get this odd transition where he follows an animated pig into the school, which I interpret him as him finally passing on so he can dream his perfect world, where everyone cheers him on as he accepts his Nobel Prize. This isn't the first time pigs have been brought up. One says, "Come join me on a billboard for Tulsi Town." But the more important thing here is Jake's story about his father and the pigs, where the father forgot about them only to find out maggots were eating them alive several days later. The pig in this metaphor is Jake, eaten alive by life, or perhaps the life he never had. His father had forgotten him just like the pigs. When Jake first arrives at the house, the father won't even look at him. It's almost as if Jake doesn't exist. Even the pig says to the janitor,
"It's not bad once you stop feeling sorry for yourself because you're just a pig."
This makes things all the more creepy when you find out that they have pig for dinner. So after this pig story, Lucy says of animals, and it's voiced over an image of the lonely janitor, I might add,
"Other animals live in the present. Humans cannot, so they invented hope."
It's when Jake lets go of this hope and kills himself that he becomes one of the pigs. So the janitor follows the pig to the high school stage where we see Jake giving an acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize. Everyone is there in old person makeup as he sings Lonely Room from Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma. The entire song is about Judd, who lives a pretty tough life during the day, but as soon as he goes to bed, he dreams. Look at an example of some of these lyrics. "And all the things that I wish for turn out like I want to be." Or, "And the girl I want ain't afraid of my arms." This song is about him and the dream we've just spent 2+ hours watching. Jake works as a janitor during the day just like Judd works as a farmhand, but both men at night are able to dream of a better world. We aren't given the full picture of Jake's life, just bits and pieces here and there, mostly through the lens of Lucy. There's an interesting scene where Lucy finds a picture of her younger self on the wall, only for it to turn into a picture of Jake, further hammering home the fact these two are one and the same. There are at least 2 scenes where we hear Jake's parents argue in the background, hinting that he didn't have the most happy childhood. His father didn't take an interest in Jake's work, but his mother did. However, we'll see how she succumbs to Alzheimer's and Jake has to care for her. There's a heartbreaking scene where Lucy tries to console Jake, who has decided to care for her ailing mother instead of putting her in an old folks home, which Lucy refers to as a warehouse. It's a thankless job, one in which Jake says,
Sometimes it feels like no one sees the good things you do.
Not only is Jake a caretaker for his parents, but his literal job is a caretaker. He lives a thankless life, dreaming of one in which people recognize him, which makes it all the more ironic that he accepts an award for all his life's work at the end, even if it's all a dream. The movie A Woman Under the Influence, which Lucy goes on a 2-minute tirade on, centers around a man having to care for a woman who is slowly succumbing to mental illness. You may have noticed the film is shot in a narrow aspect ratio, with these black bars on either side. Perhaps it's because we're only getting glimpses into Jake's mind, not the full picture, or as the poem Bone Dog puts it, just the bones.
Everything you see now, all of it, bone.
It's as if she's saying this directly at us. What we're watching are just the bones of Jake's life. Even Jake says of the poem,
It's like you wrote it about me.
His life has been filled with things like the labels found on his shelf, abandoned friendships, futile efforts and success, and unforgettable mishaps. I couldn't help but feel sad at the end, but at the same time hopeful that he can now finally live the life he's always wanted. If you stay until the post-credits, the frame lingers, just like Jake did to Lucy, as we hear what appears to be a snowplow arriving to find what awaits. Thanks for watching, everyone. This was definitely a doozy to write, so I'd appreciate all the likes, shares, and subs, plus hearing your comments below. I'd also love it if you'd follow me on Twitter at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.